And hello, hello, hello. Hopefully that's all coming through. I've got that set up. It's been a while since I've done a stream, isn't it? And that's because I've not been very well for a few weeks. But fortunately, I'm on the mend again. So I feel it might be time to start doing a little bit of, silliness like this. So let's see what we got. Who we got? PG or CG? It will be PG tonight, but something a bit strange tonight. I don't really know what my intention is with this, but I feel that there's room for me to develop a tool which might come in useful for various projects later in the year. And I just wanted to get something started, and I've not streamed in a while, so I thought, why not? Let's have a bit of a stream, try and get back in the swing of it. I've still got a bit of a cough, I've had flu, so that's why my voice is a bit gravelly, and we'll see how long it lasts out. So I might not do full commentary with this stream. I usually always have to prefix my streams like this. If you've come straight from the YouTube channel, welcome to my Twitch channel. The difference between the Twitch and the YouTube is the Twitch is completely unscripted and unrehearsed, and it will go wrong, and there will be bugs, and it will be usually a very embarrassing disaster for me, and people shout at me in the chat. So we got Alex, hey, how you doing? Blue Snow, hey, how we doing? Trolled Woods, hello. And so it is not very like the YouTube channels at all. It's well, we'll see. I think is the best way to describe it. So I said yay, not hey. And this is the other thing, if you've come from the YouTube channel, the chat does interrupt quite a little bit. I Amber, hello. Oh, good. Some people here already, that's nice to see. So what I wanted to do was, and it's actually probably not that interesting, it's not a great way to start a stream or a video, is it? Is I want to create a vector editor, which is a way of putting shapes down on a 2D plane and interacting with them. I guess things like Inkscape would be a really advanced vector editor. I really just want to tonight try and deal with straight lines and radiuses and part circles and that sort of thing. And I've got a feeling that one of the reasons I want this is later on, perhaps this year, I want to start playing with a few more physics, and I want a more intuitive way of constructing the models that I intend to use, and perhaps think about levels that are not tile-based. How do we handle that sort of scenario? And usually when I'm starting at something new, I just throw ideas at the screen and see what sticks and what kind of tools do I need to make. So the plan is tonight, I think we'll just probably draw some lines on the screen really and see if we can move them around. And there's some features that I want to throw in as well, and well, we'll see how it goes. Who have we got? Oh, Chris Winslow, hi. Terrible decision? Hi, it wasn't a terrible decision. Sir Pinwheel, hello. Lime Pixel, hello. Oh, here comes the cough. Herbal Dance, hello. Great, good stuff. I'm also thinking probably in the next couple of weeks of having a little interactive Twitch chat game accompanying what's going on here, but we'll come back to that. Sleeping Bear, hey, how you doing? We've not seen you for a while. Going to jump in a few seconds again. That's this is the ideal stream. It's not happening tonight, but I do intend on using your GUI lib for some of this because I'm actually building a utility rather than a game. So that'll be cool. And if you've not seen Sleeping Bear, check out his channel. And he's actually contributed quite a lot to the Pixel Game Engine and the One Lone Coder Initiative cause. All by himself. So I'm reading sort of quite a number of chats here. Right, so let's get started. Where are we up to? So I've created a default Pixel game application, which we've all come to know and love, and I've chosen the default resolution. It's probably going to be too low res for now. How long will we be online? Don't know yet. We'll see how long. If my voice starts to crap out on me, then that's that's probably going to draw it to a close. So by vector editor, let me try and visually describe what I need. So I'll pull up the OneNote. And in a way, OneNote itself is a vector editor. Sorry if I've just dazzled everybody there. What I'm anticipating is, oh dear, is a matrix of points on a screen. So I'm not going to draw all of these points, but let's assume each one of these crosses on the lines is points, and we've got that in 2 axes. And what I want to be able to do is create line segments which join up certain points, and the line segments are connected by something at the end that determines where the line segment ends. In addition to that, I also want sort of curves defined like this. So maybe they're defined by having a center point and some sort of radius, and maybe an arc and I don't know, something to define where it starts and where it ends. But one of the features I really want to have is some sort of snapping and glue mechanism to lock these points to the points in the background. So that way you can envisage creating quite intricate, nice vector structures then, with curved edges and sort of all sorts of different lines and angles. And we'll have some sort of data type that represents what this means. So it's really a utility. I don't have an end purpose for it just yet, but I thought it would be a nice opportunity to do some easy coding, because I've not really been coding too much recently and I want to try and ease myself back into it. Let's catch up with the chat. What happened to the SimCity style game you were developing? Let's have a look. Where is the SimCity style game? Oh, SimCity. Oh, you mean the GTA game or the SimCity game? Started so many different ones. Where is Car Crime City up to at the moment? Let's see if it can run without crashing. Just for those that are interested. Oh, it might actually crash, because I think I was halfway through doing something on it last night. So at the moment, it's kind of what you're familiar with, but I'm running out of mouse space. Let me move the old Vimto out of the way there. We can now sort of draw something like this, and we'll turn those into roads. I've tightened up the graphics a little bit to make them look a bit more sexy, I think. And we'll just turn those back into grass up there. And what I'm working on currently... Right, if it says subscribe like that, printf subscribe, that's a YouTube subscriber. So we'll not get too excited, though thank you for subscribing. Right, so let's say we've got something like this. What I'm currently working on is automata for the cars. So these will be sort of non-playing characters and the things that they decide to do. Now, at the moment, they'll all crash into each other. There is no particular agenda that these things have. But if I can remember what the button was for... was it T? Wasn't T. Let's put a road back there. I think it was... Let's try M. Yes, so M starts to enforce some sort of traffic rules. Now, unfortunately, you can see it's enforcing it for everything at the moment, so that looks pretty bad. So we can envisage a system of traffic lights coordinating what this traffic is doing. So, a whole bunch of cars in there. So, I would probably want to... Oh no, these should both be okay, these junctions, actually. So we can see that the traffic runs around. It doesn't follow the curvature of the road just yet. I'll tighten all that up later on. But hopefully it doesn't all crash into each other. Now, if I turn the lights around so we can now let that stream of traffic flow. And now that stream of traffic can flow. There we go. You see that they'll stop and do all the right things. So now we're letting that side of the traffic flow. So at the moment I've only done traffic flow for this particular type of T-junction. It's a work in progress at the moment. In terms of buildings, it might crash if I try and place a building, but let's see what happens. I'm using some community model that's been created by UXDS or UDXS. I can't remember. Anyway, one of Ben's mates who's on the Discord, and he's... kindly created these models, but you can see that they're not quite in the right scale of the rest of the world now. So that's where we've been doing... so it has been progressing. And the reason I've not been throwing videos out is I want to try and space these Car Crime City videos out throughout the year. It's not going to be a week-on-week project where you'll see lots of rapid updates. But if you've noticed, in between... at the moment, so far, I started off the year with a Car Crime City video. The next one was about collision detection, which is used in this. Then the one after that was, what did we do? Operator overloading, which is used in this. And the next one's probably going to be on some simple car physics, which is going to be used in this. And then I'll show how we bring all of those together. So it allows me to then use those videos in isolation because they're interesting topics in their own right, and instead of having big 2-hour-long videos about how I'm integrating all that technology into the game, it's just to make things flow a little bit better. So actually, we're going to see if I can zoom out. Zoom out. That's that button. So the traffic system is it's reasonably robust. So let's just throw in some horrible sets of roads. There we go. Let's just tidy up this one. So we've got that connected to there. We've got that connected to there. We've got some, this is obviously a stupid junction up here. And in fact, I can select several places to spawn cars at the same time. So let's Lots of cars. Keep going. Now, of course, the traffic is only being applied to this particular style of junction at the moment, so we'll see chaos elsewhere. But they're obeying the rules of the road, more or less. Let's try and zoom back in. Let's see what kind of chaos we've created there. And it was doing this, which is one of the reasons I wanted to come up with a vector editor, because, and we'll see in the next video of this series how I'm handling traffic, and it's working on, basically I'm creating a railway network for the cars, and they can decide intelligently based on local phenomena what they're doing at each junction. But right now it's straight edges connected to straight edges, so that's why we're not seeing them curve around the roads properly. Right, let me just catch up with what's going on in the chat. I've gone super white mode. No, hang on, looks quite a while ago. Yeah, I do have a SimCity-like project. I was doing that one in the console game engine. That's still something it's bubbling away in the background, and again is another justification for the tool that I'm developing tonight. I'm quite interested in transportation networks from a sort of conceptual point of view. So I'd like a tool that allows me to place vectors and segments and curves and other shapes in a way that creates a data structure I can then use in quite a few different projects. That's why I think there's value in what we're doing tonight. Catch up. What key was that function? Gareth's here. Hi Gareth, how are we doing? One of the tricky parts of handling the cars, they've all stopped. Why have they all stopped? There we go. What was actually the way I defined the road. So let's go down to an empty section here and define. So I made a sort of an unexpected schoolboy error right at the start. So if I create this type of network, let me remember what the button is. So I'll have one there, one there, one there, one there, one there. One there and one there. So my original attempt at this, I'm going well off track about what the video was going to be about. So the stream. There's no difference between this vertical road section and this vertical road section. Conceptually, they are the same thing. But that triggered me with a bit of a problem, because if I stick a car on here, the behaviour of the car is different depending on what it was doing before it entered the cell. It might be a bit tricky to see now because I've overcome it with the system that I had in place. So on this side, at the moment, it represents vertical upwards. And on this side, it represents vertical downwards. For the same sort of track. So that just because it's a loop, the same cell has two different properties to it now. And of course, the same applies to horizontal and vertical. So if I stick a car down here, we see it goes the other way around. And so it was getting a system where I don't have to define particularly that one side of the road is one way and one side of the road is the other. It just sort of all comes together, and that's actually proven to be quite complicated behind the scenes. In fact, I'm actually dreading making that video because there's a lot to it. So that was a bit of a schoolboy error. Then I spent some time making the graphics. I'm quite pleased with how the graphics have turned out. Anyway, let's get back on track. Let's do what we were meant to be doing tonight. So far, I've had it up to about 600 cars before it starts lagging. But I don't think we'll ever see 600 in the game. Realistically, in the final game, I expect maybe there'll be 10 cars on screen at most at any one time. So Magetsu's saying the stream's not working at his end. I've not dropped any frames, so it must be something at your end, yeah. Well, thanks, Gareth. That's nice. He's Gareth saying he's liking the Pixel game engine. Yeah, you just have fun with it. Ancient child. 10 cars. Well, you'll only ever see sort of 3 or 4 blocks wide. As the camera pans out, of course, you'll see more blocks. Right, so what was I doing? I was creating a tool there. It's not going to be anywhere near as exciting as Car Crime City, I'm afraid. So what I wanted to try and do first was... Ah, Twitch subscriber, Original Moose, thank you very much, man. Now, this doesn't happen very often, so I'm unsure if a message has appeared anywhere or what's going on. But I'm pleased that the notification works, even though it was not quite the right notification. Oh, excuse me. So, yes, Original Moose, thank you. Right, so I've not even started coding yet. Let's try and get something in. Right, so I want some basic primitive that represents a shape. So let's just start there. And I've got my new type, haven't I, which I created in... Ah, Gareth. Thank you very much, Gareth. I will return the favour there, certainly. I've got one going spare at the moment, so I'll pass that on. Thank you very much. Right, so I wanted to create some basic shape. In this case it's just going to be line, but we're going to start with a base class, I think, for shapes and get them to draw themselves, maybe. Is that too complicated to begin with? Or should I start by drawing a matrix in the background and being able to pan and zoom that around? Tell you what, do you know what? I'll do the panning and zooming first, simply because I'm going to obviously steal the code from my panning and zooming video, but I've not done that yet in the Pixel Game Engine, and so it might be worth converting that over. So let me just dig that code up. It's appeared on a different monitor. Oh, by the way, if you guys aren't following Gareth on Twitch, do check him out. His streams are actually they're very different to mine, and so far I've been watching him hack the Elgato Stream Deck tool thing, and it's quite interesting because he's using C# and F#, and it's all stuff that I'm incredibly unfamiliar with. So well worth a watch if you're getting a bit bored of good old C++. Right, so I'm stealing code from the panning and zooming section. That's what I was doing, wasn't it? Right, now, so this is what I used to do, of course. I used to have things like this, but now I've got a nice, sexy new type I can use instead. So we'll try and make these conversions. So the offset, I guess, is just going to become OLC VF2D. And we'll just default these down to 0. And start, pan, and scale X. We want to do exactly the same thing for those. I guess it's no longer F offset, is it? It's V offset. You have to be careful saying F offset, don't you? Start, pan, and scale. And we'll default scale to 1, yes, because we're going to be multiplying and doing all sorts of things with scale. So I'm just trying to implement a simple pan and zoom mechanism, literally by ripping off my own code from a previous video. So then I had two functions converting the coordinates from the world to the screen. So let's throw those in too. There we go. World to screen took in that. Now we're using our nice new vectors now. I'll keep those where they are, but these ones change over, don't they? Ooh, look at all this, all very different now. So the coordinate we're going to pass in, should I keep this as vectors? Yes, I will keep this as vectors. OLC VF2D, and we're going to pass in the vector object, V off. Oh no, hang on, we'll get this right. Got to type these in right. That's the actual coordinate I want to change, isn't it? So well, that's just going to be V. It doesn't have to be anything particularly fancy. So this then is something different. I don't want to go into using the integer vector types, so we may not be able to sort of fully exploit the vector here. I'm going to keep end screen X as it is, and here we'll have the V dot X, and here we'll have V dot Y. And so this becomes VOffset.x. There's all sorts of chat going on. Sorry if I'm not paying too much attention to it. Soviet Bill, try simulating the 7 roundabout system in Watford. Noodles, hi. Not yet tired from C++. Well, that's good to hear. But tonight is a slightly more relaxed coding session from me, so it's not going to be too quick. It's just I'm trying to get back into the swing of it after a bout of flu. vscale.x. As you can tell, my voice is a little bit gravelly at the moment. What did I call it? I called it f-scale, didn't I? That was a schoolboy error. vscale. vscale.y. My mouse clicks have gone soft tonight. Right, so that's converting one way, and we want to do sort of the opposite. Oh, that looks like a horrible mess now, doesn't it? When going the other way. So that's going to convert to a single one of these. World X and world Y. So we'll stick that there. v.x, v.y, vscale x. Now Magetza will be shouting at the screen going, you can use Control and R and Shift and Alt and G and all these sort of things. I just don't know. Right, so that's two functions converted, hopefully. Right, what next is to rip off out of here? So the first thing was to rip off the original offset, which was described as screen width divided by 2 and screen height divided by 2. So we'll do the same sort of thing. So that's what it was originally, but now of course I can do f offset equals negative screen width divided by 2 and negative screen height divided by 2. Excellent. Alright, what else have we got? So in on user update we had some buttons to hold the mouse and things like that. Okay. And then when did I actually do drawing at the end? So we just wanted to grab a copy of the mouse coordinates in on user update. We'll get to some drawing soon. A little bit of housekeeping to do first. So OLC VF2D. I'm going to have to get. I hate namespaces. V mouse equals get mouse X get mouse Y. Let's have a look. See what's going on there. So I've got something covering up my notifications now. Terrible decision. Thank you very much for the follow. Get mouse Y. That'll probably throw some sort of error later about not being able to convert those integers into a float. So we've now captured our mouse vector in screen space. And what do we do? So let's copy this. For panning, we need to capture the screen location when the user starts to pan. That's an insightful comment. So that's happening on mouse down. Now, I would love some middle mouse button action here, but maybe that's for a different night. So we basically just want to cache the start pan coordinates. So v start pan equals v mouse. Yes, should have moved to vector types long time ago. As the mouse moves, the screen location changes. Convert the screen change into coordinates to implement the pan. So let's just throw that in. I'm going to throw away some of these comments. I don't think they're entirely necessary. Magetza shaking his head there. I have a test on abstract algebra on Wednesday, but this is more interesting at the moment. Well, it could be more interesting. We'll start to see when it starts going wrong. That's usually when it gets interesting for the viewers and just embarrassing for me. Right, so when the mouse is being panned, we're then doing some numerical operation in this case. So it's v offset equals minus equals. What did we call it? V mouse take v start pan divided by v scale. Look at that. That's just good. And then we updated v start pan, didn't we? V start pan equals v mouse. We'll get rid of all of that. This is interesting. I've got a divide error. Why have we not got it? So I've not done an operator overload for Really? Is that the case? Which operator overload have I forgotten here? So here we go. We should create some sort of interactive counter this time for things that surprise Javid on stream. I can't see it. I can't see why that divide's not there. No operator divide matches these operands. Ah, because, of course, vscale is... I can't divide a vector by a vector. So that's interesting. Right. So, that is interesting indeed. So scale is... I've assumed scale could be different per axes here. What I've done is bundled the scale into a vector, fine, fair enough. But what I can't do is divide a vector, which is the return of vmouse take vStartPan, by another vector, because it doesn't make much sense. What this should be is a scalar. Now, do I want to retain sort of individual scales per axis? I probably don't. So I'm going to do a really horrible, gruesome hack right here and do that. There we go, that makes sense. We'll worry about that later. Let's just keep moving on. I think I don't really want for this independent scaling in the X and Y axis. I don't think it's necessary. Good. Just catching up with some of the chat. Right, so now we've handled excuse me, we've handled panning offset. We now need to think about stealing the zoom. Now, I'd love to use the mouse wheel again. Somebody should be working on mouse wheel implementations, but I don't think anybody is. What we do for zoom is we take the mouse coordinate before the zoom, we take the mouse coordinate after the zoom, and then we shift the whole offset by the difference between the two, and that's necessary so we can zoom into a particular location. So again, I'm just going to steal all of this code. And we'll bodge it in to make it work. So, this is the mouse before the zoom. Well, there's all sorts of things going on here. So that can now just be vmouse. Screen to world. Can it just be vmouse? No, I don't think it can be because it's integers going in, isn't it? Screen to world. Yes, screen X and screen Y. Excuse me. So that should be .x, vmouse.y. Hopefully it'll just turn those into integers, and what we get out of it is the mouse before zoom, which can be a vector type. Vmouse before zoom. And it should just go away and populate that. I'll just double check that it does do that. Just make sure, yep, so screen to world can return a vector type. So we're taking the mouse coordinates of the screen and we're translating them into world space. Now you can see this is all console game engine because it's looking specifically for different keys. So OLC key Q. And here you can see where I was doing the scaling independently, and that's why it didn't work very well. So what I'll do is just change that over to vscale multiplies itself by that. And we'll do the same for key A, but this time it's 0.999. So that's changing the zoom level. And then we want to pass in the same mouse coordinates we had before back into the function. So now we're working out where the mouse has changed in between the two different world spaces because of the zoom. So we can just copy that again. If you don't know what I'm talking about, or you're going, oh, this is all rubbish, then do check out this particular video about panning and zooming. It's quite a useful video. I'm running out of mouse space. Why am I running out of mousing space? I'll tell you what it is. It's because I've got my phone jammed up where my mouse... Oh, that's so much better. Where my mouse cable goes. Right. So what are we doing here? Right. So we've got an offset, and we need to change that offset by the result of this. So that's mouse after zoom. and mouse after zoom. Have a quick look at some of the chats. What are we working on? Yes, so anybody late to the show, and I admit there's a few of you, this is a tool which I'm going to use to create basically vector graphics. Because I've got a feeling I've got a few projects this year where I'm going to want some way of having a standard way of implementing some basic vector geometry together. And I don't have a tool that does that. There probably are tools that exist, but I like to make my own things. So v offset equals, actually plus equals mouse before zoom, v mouse before zoom minus v mouse after zoom. And so that's adjusted our offset pending any zooms that have occurred. So far so good. Let's just get rid of these comments, except for this horrible ghastly hack here. Right, so we've got our offsets, we've got our zooms. Now we want to try drawing something. So let's just implement some dummy code for now, just to make sure everything is working. So we'll clear to OLC, very dark blue. Oh dear me. Very dark blue. I prefer very dark blue to black. And I'm just looking at my previous panning and zooming code just to see if there's anything there worth salvaging, but I think it probably is. We need to do this from scratch now. So let's just see if that works at all. I want to draw a line. Let's draw a rectangle at a particular location, just to see if this is working. So let's say I've got 2 points that represent my rectangle. I'll see BF2D, vrect1, and we'll call that, it's in world space now, and that's the critical thing to remember. So everything's in world space, so let's just minimize that a little bit. So that's 10 by 10, and we'll have a width and a height. Is that going to work, or is that not going to work? We'll have to see about that. And we'll keep that at 10 by 10 too. So it's a little square. Just to make it different, we'll call that 10 by 20. Now, before any coordinates get passed to any drawing functions, we need to translate the world to screen to give us some values for our drawing functions. So I think in this case we want integer values, because that's what the drawing functions take. So we'll have int px and py, and the world to screen function is going to populate those. So vrect1 is going to go into px and py. Very good. And we'll also have p, now this is the bit that's going to confuse me, I think, p width and p height. And we'll do exactly the same for the other one, because don't forget we're translating now from world space into screen space. And we'll come up with a tidier way to do all of these things later. And now we'll draw a rectangle at these locations. So we've got px, py, p width, p height, and we'll draw it, white. White is good enough. So is that everything that I need to do for this particular test? Let's just see what happens. Oh, compile errors. Element 1, conversion from int to t. Oh yeah, see, these are the things I thought it was. This is why templates aren't all they're made up to be, It couldn't work out what to do there. I feel we've got a few errors like that. Yeah, anywhere we've got, it doesn't seem to, it seems to be a bit of a downside to using templates. What's going on is because it's trying to create this vector, and it's seeing that these are returning ints, but it's expecting floats. Now normally the compiler's smart enough to deal with it, but it doesn't seem to be the case anymore. What have we got going on here? Narrowing conversion from this to this, a screen to world. Yeah, so you have to cast everything. I mean, these are just warnings. I could ignore them, but because they're warnings involving templates, you get all this horrific mess sort of sticking out the bottom. That'll probably moan at me as well. And here, oh dear. And it's very possible those might moan at me, but we'll see. Good. So, has it worked? Well, there is a square, and what was it to pick things up was mouse button. It's zooming as I'm moving the mouse around. That's curious, it shouldn't be doing that. So this is going to be fun to debug. This is the width and height variable not doing what it should be doing, which is what I was a little bit concerned about, but we'll double check elsewhere too. So we'll try it without any zooming at all, and just try and understand what its behaviour is. That is quite curious. Interesting. Am I over the flu yet? Not quite. I'm still coughing a little bit. I should change the scale to being a single float instead of a vector. That's exactly what I was talking about. So at the moment I'm just hacking it by doing that. But something else is going wrong. So I've done something stupid somewhere. Offset X. That looks fine. Scale looks fine. I think all of that looks okay. So it's something more to do with how we're drawing the rectangle. So let me just test this again. If I pick up the rectangle here, that remains relative. So that's telling me that the panning is actually quite accurate, even if I move things over there. So it really is just something's going on with this width and height parameter. So is that something I'll have to change then? What are we going on? So the width and the height. It's 10 by 10. So let's just turn that to a unit at the moment and try and understand it. It's interesting that it's going to negative before it gets to the end of the screen. That's I have absolutely no idea what's going on. Got an offset before zoom. Taking the mouse coordinates before zoom, that's all fine. We're not doing any zooming. So let's just in case we've got a corruption there. But I don't think we have. Nope, definitely something to do with the width and height variables. Yeah, PW and PH, something's wrong with that. Oh yeah, there's quite a few people here tonight. The most honest thing I've heard from a programmer, I have absolutely no idea what's going on. Just read it like I see it. So obviously quite a lot of people here. I'll just explain that this is not like my YouTube channel. It's a lot more informal. It's all sorts of things go wrong, and it's all completely unplanned. And what I'm developing is a tool with which I want to be able to develop sort of vector artwork for potentially a series of videos I want to do later this year. But right now I can't even get my panning and zooming to work properly because my zoom system just simply doesn't work. And why is that? I'm obviously scaling width and height. So if I fix these to a particular value, then it's going to look like it's working, but it's not actually working. So I'll not do that. Let me just make sure I've not missed an obvious thing to check here. It isn't just scaling the width and the height, is it? It's not that simple, because in the console game engine, the drawRect function used to take the top left coordinate and the bottom right coordinate, and I changed that to width and height for the Pixel game engine. It was one of the more subtle changes, but something I think everybody benefited from. But I don't know why width and height are scaling as I'm panning the screen around. That's more interesting. So that seems to imply that I've got something going on where panning is related to zoom, which is a bit unusual. So as I move the coordinates over to one side, is it because they're not relative to 0, 0? Let me just try that. Well, now it shrinks properly in the corner there. Good. Don't know why that's good. Is that good? I don't know. Is the screen square? Where do you define PW and PH? They're technically defined via VRect, going through this world to screen transform, and I think it's just there's some sort of compound transformation happening here because these are not strictly world coordinates. But it's no good if everything that I want to draw for the rest of the day starts sort of zooming and moving all over the place. But let's just test the theory a little bit whilst we're here. Let's draw a grid of points and see what's happening to that grid of points. So I don't know. We'll draw 20 points across by 20 points down. Pull that back into view so you can all see it. For int y equals 0, y is less than 20 by 20 grid of points, y plus plus. And so for each point here, I want to transform that point from the world to the screen again, and we'll do that with a little vector, vf2d. Sorry if my mic is moving out the way. Call that p, and that's going to be equal to x times, what should we have it by? I'll have a point every 0.5, every 0.1. Let's try that. X times 0.1, comma, y times 0.1. So we'll create a point. Used brackets there, haven't I? Create a point, and we'll convert that and draw that point to the screen. And we'll get rid of drawing this rectangle just for now until I understand what's going on with the width and the height there. And hopefully this should give us some insight into what's going on with the width and the height. He says incredibly optimistically. So that's taking our world space, and we need some screen space coordinates. That's what we need. So sx and sy, that's fine. They're going to get deposited in here after the transform. Sx, sy, and then we want to just draw that pixel. Sx and sy. So this should draw a matrix of points. Draws a single point. Why does it draw a single point? What is my current screen and zoom and things like that? What have I done wrong now? I've got a single point, world to screen, that all looks fine. Offset seems to be a bit wrong. Let's just put you back in and see if zooming does anything. There we go. So we were just not zoomed in enough. So there's our matrix of points. And they seem to be panning and zooming quite fine. So there's something a bit strange about adding width and height into that. I'll probably just need to think about how to handle that slightly differently. So we can see that the scale is not changing depending on where the object is. So why would scaling the width and the height change? May have to think about some sort of a little utility function for just that. But fortunately, I don't really think I'm going to be using that in this application just yet, but it should be an easy fix. So the plan is, once I've got a grid, I then want to be able to snap to that grid with the mouse cursor. So that's probably the next thing to add in. And it's something which selects the point that's nearest the mouse cursor, and that should be easy enough, I think, he says. Might not feel very well. So intuitively, the first thing I wanted to do was just, well, you take whatever the floating point position is in this space and you convert that back, and that will lock it to sort of the top left corner all the time. But that's not quite how it would work, is it? Because you want the cursor to be sort of near the point, and that's where you determine where you're going to lock onto. So I'll have to have a think about that. Perhaps we offset things accordingly to give us that kind of behaviour. Let's have a think. Excuse me. I have a catch up with the chat at the moment. Stream is frozen for me for 10 minutes. I think it's just you, Dabs. Something to do with my scale.x hack. I think it's... Is this pretty much the prep for your YouTube channel? Yes and no. It depends. This is a bit of a feeling ground to see what's going to work and what's not. I usually, for me, it's quite a slow way to code and stream at the same time. So if I really want to get through something, I'll just keep it off stream. When I'm doing something casually or just want to have a bit of user engagement and see what's going on, then I like to stream it. I also like to stream things I can get done fairly quickly, so the stream itself is a complete thing, rather than being part 17 of 349. Just to keep things moving. Let's have a look. I think it's more... I'm looking at Ben's solution here in the chat about the rectangle p width and p height. I think it's because effectively p width and p height are getting scaled twice. I'm actually not quite sure at all. Now I'm thinking about it. They're scaled relative to the wrong place. I mean, the way to work around this is to actually just use the top left and bottom right coordinates that define the rectangle, and then draw that accordingly. So, for example, let's have a look. If I wanted to have my rectangle be, what did we say was sensible, something like 2 by 2, I could instead create px1, py1, and create those, and then have px2 and py2. Which gives me the top left and bottom right of my rectangle. And then when I'm drawing them, P1 and Y1, and this one becomes PX2 take PX1 and PY2 take PY1. So I think that's the way around it, because what we don't really want to do is scale that width and height. We'll see now, as embarrassingly it isn't, but we'll check it out. Oh, am I not drawing my rectangle anymore? Oh, there we are. Actually, oh, that's convenient, isn't it? Look, I've conveniently wrapped up my my grid there. So that's solved it. I just need I need to think about why I'm basically doubling up on the scaling of width and height in that case. So that's why I'm not too concerned about it. And the zoom is quite nice because it zooms to wherever the mouse coordinate is. It keeps that point fixed underneath the mouse. I mean, anyway, I'm sure many of you have seen that particular video. Yeah, see, Magetsub's got it there. Yeah, the width and height should only be scaled. It doesn't need to be offset. So we'll come up with something. If I end up using the rectangle function, we'll do that. Right. So now I want to draw. Well, we'll have some sort of indicator of mouse cursor, which is sort of in-app cursor. VF2D V cursor. So this is going to just be something that slops about, locking to the nearest point, because I quite like snapping, and I guess snap size is probably something we want to turn into a variable at some point. We'll keep the grid there, why not? We'll get our mouse coordinate system. So for now, let's just draw a circle wherever the near. We'll lock it. We'll do what I suggested to begin with. We'll just lock it to the nearest value. So we've got an int. Is that right? Is that what I need for this? What is my mouse cursor going to be? Thinking. I want to lock it to the nearest point. Should we just have a go at trying to get this right, rather than hacking it and going through several different levels? if my grid so far, grid space, and let's just turn that into a variable, float f grid equals 0.1 for now. Float. F grid and F grid. So collectively as a community, because obviously I'm getting a bit tired, let's see if we can let's see if we can work this out between us. So we want whatever my mouse coordinate is, and that will be, it's all in world space now, so don't worry about conversions and things like that. We want to get to the nearest 0.1 division of it. I'll just make sure we're in the latest world space. For zoom and after zoom, yeah, mouse.x and mouse.y is in screen space, so we need to convert that. We've done that to world, so mouse before zoom. Mouse after zoom is technically our world space mouse. Just floor it to a 2 grid. Well, that was one of the ways I was thinking of doing it, but I don't know. It feels like it's a bit of a cheap shot. Well, let's have a think. So v cursor, can we do it all with sort of an interesting vector? Let's try it with just the x-axis for now. So the v cursor.x is equal to our mouse after zoom. Well, that's the place to start, actually, isn't it? Let's just do straight away mouse after zoom and draw a cursor. Make sure everything's just working as we go. So mouse after zoom, and we'll draw a circle. Now, it's one of the things we're going to have to get used to doing is any coordinate system we want to draw, we need to consider. So it might be worth wrapping up some of these drawing functions later on, once we've finished experimenting like this. So world to screen for this time is our v cursor, yes. V cursor to screen, draw a circle at location sx, sy. Now the radius is times by our scale value, of course. So if we want a radius, before the points were 0.1, so I'd suggest we have them at 0.025 as a radius, 0.25f. I can't remember if it's going to be times or divide by scale. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We'll actually change that scale value now before things get really horribly complicated. Let's just do that. So up here where we had this little hack, that will just change back to f scale. And we'll get rid of this. This can just become float f scale. So this is going to represent our entire zoom at the moment, 1.0. So this becomes a bit simpler. So that still can't do it as a nice vector operator overloaded function yet, but fair enough. F scale. And this one becomes f scale and f scale. F scale and F scale. F and F. I think that's everywhere. So whether it's multiply or divide, I can't work out in my head at the moment, but we'll see what happens. So let's just zoom in. There we go. So we've got a cursor always following our mouse, and the cursor is also scaling, so that's quite nice. But actually I've just worked out I don't really want the cursor to scale. I want it to remain a fixed radius no matter what. I don't actually need to do that at all. So we'll keep that now at a radius of, say, 3 pixels. 3 pixels feels good. And we'll set that colour to yellow. Yeah, because I think I want to use red for the points. I'm trying to eventually replicate what I see in my head. There we go, so that's better. Much nicer. So now I want this yellow cursor to sort of snap to the nearest point. A quick look at the chat. You need to add a translate layer. Somebody, and maybe it was you, Double Sigma, sent a pull request through on the GitHub showing how to do a translate layer. Yeah, it's an interesting idea to have some sort of permanent built-in offset. Potentially, maybe it is a solution. Maybe I should put it in. perhaps call it a viewport. The 3D extension is, well, it doesn't right now, but it will eventually actually support the concept of a viewport. You can often see what I'm thinking of doing in the future if you look at the GitHub and you see things that are commented out. You can see some sneaky features that I might be adding later on. I've lost my code. Fuba, okay. Should the snapping range be affected by scale? Well, I guess we just want it to snap to a point. So how do we actually get it to snap to a point? That's the more interesting part. So we've got our mouse after we've zoomed it. The easiest way is probably to divide that by our grid size. Is that right? It's in world space. Yeah, we could just floor it, and then if we floor it and add plus 0.5 to what we're flooring, that should round it up accordingly. But I can't do that with fancy operator overloading. So if I just try this, so floor f vmouse.zoom.x plus 0.5 f. So this is assuming everything is working in unit space. So it isn't working in unit space, it's working in what we want it to be, grid space. So I think I need to, again, multiply or divide that by our grid size. I think. Maybe. Let's see what happens. Do the same for Y. I think I might have got these in the wrong order a little bit. So we're taking our zoom in world space. We're rounding it to the nearest unit value in world space, and then we're scaling it by our grid value. I don't think that's right, but we'll see. Well, it's not, doesn't look like it's a million miles off. Not working. No idea. That's doing all sorts of interesting behavior. Zoom back in. Try panning. Yes, I think I've got those in the wrong order. So we want to scale our mouse after zoom by 1 over f grid, isn't it? So if our grid is at 0.1, we want to scale it up by multiplying everything by 10 in this case. And then adding plus 5 to it for the rounding. The other answer, of course, is to make things a little simpler to begin with, is actually to draw our grid in unit space, and that way we can understand what's going on. So let's try that first. Right, so yes, so when we draw our grid in unit space, that seems to make a bit more sense. And of course now it's quite nice because, excuse me, our rectangle is also, we said it was 2 units by 2 units, and now our cursor is locking to the nearest space. Good. So right now I'm hacking my way through this. I just want to try and get some basic ideas working. I'll flesh out the reality of the maths and the scaling later on. So that's quite nice. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, so it would become divide by 20, but that's if I wanted the whole grid to be 1 by 1 across, and I don't. I think I'm quite happy with the grid at the moment representing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Of course, scale becomes rather arbitrary at that point. Excuse me. Right, so now I've got a fancy grid, and I've got a shape. What I want to be able to do is to select a point, and then select another point and draw a line between them, and that line then becomes some sort of object. So we're getting into sort of the bit more interesting stuff now. So let's create a basic shape which we'll call a line, which will have a starting and an end coordinate. S line and we'll call that start. See, start and end sort of implies that there's direction on the line. Maybe that's actually something we might want later on. So yes, I'll stick with start and end. Yes. Okay, and so I'm going to start drawing a line when the user presses the L key. So let's try and factor that in. We've got our drawing going on down here. We don't need to draw the rectangle just at the moment. We'll keep the grid and all that later on, so then we'll just scroll through all of our shapes one by one and draw them as necessary. And get rid of that too. So drawing is going to be quite distinct from everything else that's going on in the game. So after zooming, then we'll respond to some commands. So if get key, we'll see key L for line dot be pressed. Then I'm actually going to steal my cursor calculation from down here and have that up here. I need my grid variable now, don't I? Grid is probably something we should have in the class. We'll stick that up there. So when I press the L key, that's where I want to start my line. So we're going to create a new line at this point. I'm probably going to need a flag to say I am creating a shape, aren't I? Bool be creating shape. I'll set that to false. So if I'm creating a shape, if I press L for the first time, be creating shape equals true, and we'll create a temporary shape that represents the line that we're drawing. So S line temp line for now. Now later on I plan to extend line into different sort of geometric primitives, but temporary line it is for the time being. So if L goes down, that's where we're going to start creating a shape. Temp line dot start equals v cursor. And we're going to stop drawing the line when we click. Now I might want it so that click actually starts the drawing and the ending. It depends what kind of CAD software you're used to, I suppose, he says with a wry smile. So if we're creating a shape, we want to draw that temporary shape. Creating shape, temp line dot end is always going to be equal to v cursor. And then if we're creating a shape, we want to draw that shape, of course. We've got our cursor. Cursor is always going to stay on top, so grid's always at the bottom. We want to draw our shapes here. Let's have a quick catch up with some of the chats. Hungarian notation is so weird. Well, don't tell that to Gorbit. You see, Gareth, that's why I quite like the pixel game engine and the console game engine. It does make things look quite old. SVG is a horrible and complex format. What does the S mean? Struct. Come on, Ben. There's a reason I don't want to go straight into SVG and things like that. I want to be able to customize what these shapes mean fundamentally. Right, so if we're drawing a temporary shape, we'll draw that, little midge there, we'll draw that in a slightly different colour. So we'll need to use these. I didn't catch it, did I? Come here. There we go. Lovely. Midge meet trousers. Take that. We've got our cursor coordinates. We don't want our code. We want our start and end of this line, EX and EY. So the first thing we're going to pass is our temporary shape. What did I call it? I didn't call it temporary shape, did I? Temporary line. Temporary line dot v start. And we'll grab the temporary line end. And we'll draw a line between the two. In fact, I want to do more than just draw a line. I want to actually show the end and start points as nodes. So the first thing we want to do is draw the line, definitely. Oh, something's happened. A notification. Debajit Banerjee has just subscribed on YouTube, I should point out. Thank you. Draw a line from SX, SY to EX to EY. And we'll draw it in, I want that to remain as white. Very good. Has anything actually been very, very dark blue in the background? Maybe I'll just have dark blue instead. And my grid, I don't want to draw as big, thick white dots. Instead, I'm going to draw them as grey, so they don't stand out quite as much. So I've got my... No, I've just changed the wrong one there, haven't I? I'm going to draw what I'm currently drawing as yellow. The cursor is currently yellow. Maybe that should be green then, what I'm currently drawing. Green, yellow for the cursor, and this one's where I've not got anything, should be grey for the dots. Have a look. Dark blue for the background. So if I'm drawing a shape, we're going to see some sort of line, hopefully, moving around. Right, so I can select a starting point, L, very nice, it's locking to all of the particular nodes, so I get nice straight lines when and where I need them. Now, should it be click to finish, and that then adds that to I guess a vector or a list of shapes that we're drawing. I'm going to actually use a list of shapes, because I want the ability later on to remove shapes too. The mic setup, it's probably because I've had a lot of time to tune and tweak this mic. I didn't use the Phantom Power extension. So, because I have one of my hobbies, you might not know this, guy, I'm actually a musician, so I've got quite a nifty sound setup here as it is, and I just thought that the mic was cheap enough to stay out the way. My normal audio mic, which I use with the band, isn't that suitable for doing voiceovers with. It gets quite big and gets in the way. So when I click now, that's when I want to select the finishing point for the shape. Now that does actually pose me with a bit of a problem, that I'm going to have to start scrolling with a different mouse button. So let's just check that works, if mouse button 2 is my middle mouse button. It is, good. So I can see, this is why I want to be able to zoom with the wheel rather than the keyboard. So now I've freed up the left click button to actually do things, which makes more sense. If we're creating a shape, there we go, and if we get in this particular event, I don't know why I couldn't paste any of that, that's all irrelevant, there we go, get mouse 0 dot b, we'll have released, I think, just in case you want to have, you press it down, you think, oh, I'm just in the wrong place, you've still got an opportunity to do something about it. So we'll do it on the release event, and we'll set the temp line will have been set to its correct location. So then we just want to push that to a list of lines. So let's create that. Diana Petre, oh, it's good. Hopefully a female member. Excellent. I'm really quite keen on trying to encourage more lady programmers out there. So we're creating a list of these shapes now. S line list shapes, I'm just going to call it for now. So you can see, right, when I'm doing these Twitch streams, I'm really just throwing ideas at the screen. There's no structure, there's no format. It's just a way of me brain dumping quickly what I want to get, and then over the next few days, or whenever I get the interest, I'll refine these ideas into a slightly more sensible solution. So now I want to add to my list of shapes the temporary line, list shapes, temporary line. That doesn't work because I need a pushback. As you can see, my voice is starting to fall apart, which was a little bit expected. It's a shame though. Now, of course, once we've clicked, we're no longer creating a shape. The shape exists normally. So creating shape gets set to false. So now I've got a list of shapes. I actually want to draw those as well. So this is my temporary drawing for the shape that I'm currently creating. So we'll keep that above the list of normal shapes. So we'll just auto through them now. Auto S, well, we'll call it shape, in my list of shapes. Chapeaus. And we'll do pretty much the same thing, just to draw those lines. Now, the shapes, ultimately, I think, will be responsible for drawing themselves, but right now, as I say, we're just brain dumping, we'll hack it down. So that's shape. And that shape, and once a shape has been cemented into place, that's going to be drawn as white. And I think, at the same time, I want to draw the nodes for the shape as little filled-in circles. So we'll have a fill circle. I won't scale the radius for this, and these are going to be filled in red. I'm just thinking ahead now. Am I going to have to do all of these nodes separately later on? Our line's going to overdraw the nodes that have previously been drawn, but every line is effectively going to draw two nodes, one at each end, so you'll always be left with a situation where the nodes were the last things drawn. It's redundant, but it works out for me in the end. Okay, so we'll run through that. That's acceptable. So fill circle, and we'll give that a radius of 2. What did we give to the radius of the cursor? 3. Yes, so 2 is good. And we'll do the same for the Alpha Kenny body. I don't know why the YouTube subscribers pop up here. I set it up when I did some YouTube streams last year, and it's obviously the stream dashboard seems to pick up both. So we're drawing a node at each end. We're drawing the line white. Right, let's have a play. Let's see what happens. So I've got a grid. I'm still trying to zoom with the mouse wheel. I want to draw a line, so we draw a line from there to there. Excellent. Let's draw a line from there to there, from there to there, there to there. We'll finish that off. I do apologise for the coughing. I know it doesn't make for good streaming. So that's quite nice. So we've now got some sort of basic vector art tool. Now we'll have to start adding other features such as delete and whatnot. Let's just have keep playing with it while we can. So that added a single node, so that's no good. So we'll stick that there to there to there to there to there. Very nice. Okay. I think I might really consider, just for the Windows users out there, adding in mouse scrolling. Just have a quick look at the chats. Do you have any... Oh, so go back a bit further. Left click to start a line, left click to finish, right click to end, middle click to pan and scroll and zoom. If you're not familiar with CAD, That's quite an unusual way to do things, but no, there may be some merit in starting a line with clicking. Sorry if I'm catching up with the chat. Does Mrs. Javid code? No, she doesn't. Do you have any good resources for very beginners starting to learn C++? My partner would like to learn some programming, but I don't know what to advise. Start making Hello World. Well, I'll let other people answer that one. I have very limited knowledge of good resources to start learning to program, mainly because I'm 20 years out of date from all of the books that I was reading. I find there's a guy on our server called Eremil, and he does some tutorial streams on the basics of C++, and he's just made his way onto the standards committee, so he's actually worth watching. Sleeping Bear also is pretty good at showing you how to do things. I honestly wouldn't recommend C++ as a first language. That's an interesting statement. I wholeheartedly disagree with it. Programming principles and practices using... Oh yeah, we can always read that book. Whereabouts are you from? I'm from the UK, just outside Liverpool. I can never find what I'm looking for from the Microsoft documentation and Mono documentation. I don't know anything about Mono documentation. Is this going to turn into a video? Maybe, maybe not. It's a useful tool which might help me make some videos later on. Things I've got in mind for this. Yeah, it's not a secret. Obviously, this is a nice way of creating interesting 2D vector-based shapes, which could be used in something like a 3D engine or a physics engine. It's also a nice way of drawing nodes and graphs, which I've got some interesting algorithms which we can use to explore how graphs and trees work later on. I'm planning on using it in the Car Crime City game because the way I'm currently creating the road network is quite complicated, and I'd like to have some finer control over it. If I wanted to do sort of known animation paths in a particular game, this is a way I can define those paths and define the properties of them. I'm also thinking potentially later, and much later on down the line, there's scope to do things like skeletal animation and inverse kinematics, but you need starting points. And rather than just always having a list of coordinates on the screen and how things interact, I wanted a tool to allow me to do it. But it won't always be straight edges to straight edges. I'm also thinking of adding in curvature as well, because even though tiles are great for levels, and we've all done games where we're using tiles, if you want to do more interesting things, you need to start using edges and curves if you want slightly more modern, slightly more acceptable ways of defining levels. So you can have things like slopes in your levels quite easily without needing to worry about the tiles. And of course, once you've got the bounding edges of something, triangulating that sort of thing becomes quite easy too. So then you can create lots of filled in solid areas and effectively use rasterizing techniques to draw levels that are a bit more interesting. So I've got lots of ideas for what I want to do with a tool like this, but I've just never sat down and started to develop them. Mixie Rose, oh hello, thank you. Thank you for the follow. Yeah, Bezier curves could be fun to add. Now we've got some familiarity with splines on this channel. So potentially it could be. I'd like to stay to basic geometric primitives, because as soon as I start using a spline, yes, I can do splines, I can get them to join up nicely. They become quite difficult to do physics on in a hacky way. Knowing that your particular curve has a known radius cuts a whole load of problems out of doing interesting physics. Splines are unique in that they have lots of properties which are non-deterministic without sort of travelling along them. Not the most ideal thing to use in an engine where you've already got hundreds of calculations going on. Right, so the next phase, what is going on? Next phase for me on this, I think, is to start thinking about how we can add a circle. And I want to use the C key for that. So the idea with a circle is we choose our midpoint. Then I want to press the C key and we move out, and that sets the radius of the circle. And then I probably want to find some way of wrapping that up into an arc, but I think I might leave that for when my brain is in maths mode, which it clearly hasn't been tonight. And also I probably want to find a way to make the grid sort of infinitely scalable, so it's not actually a fixed object full of dots. It becomes just something in the background to help you with. And then we need to add lots of interesting things. So I'd like to be able to select a line by clicking on the line. So these are all things still yet to add. How do I, for example, move a node once that I've placed it? What happens when I move that node? Does it move both lines? So I've got to start thinking about all of these different policies for how things behave. But let's add circles for the time being. And so now we probably want to start thinking a little bit about the object hierarchy of the application. So it's yes, let's do that. So we'll have a oh dear, I'm shouting, struct. Why am I shouting? We'll have a basic shape, which is going to be our most basic primitive. So it has basically no properties, but it is going to have a method of basically draw yourself. Do you know what? I'm going to call it draw yourself. Why not? Excuse me. I'm going to pass into that the Pixel game engine, but I also need to pass in some additional information, don't I? Because it's going to need this scaling information. It's going to need access to these world transforms, world to screen, and whatnot. So, can I just brutally hack my way around that? Maybe I can. We'll think about that in a minute. But for now, we'll get them to draw themselves to the through the Pixel game engine. We'll do it that way. I'm just trying to anticipate that maybe these things could become a lot more complicated later on. Draw yourself. Now there'll be some additional parameters to pass through with that. Not really thought about what they are yet. Obviously need a return type there. And so one of our basic shapes we already know is line, S line. Oh dear. Shape. That needs to be a public. And that's only got a start and an end point. And we'll also have S circle, which is a type of shape, and that's going to have a midpoint, and it's technically have a radius. Now, how do I want to define the radius? Do I always want to define the radius as being an actual point on the grid, so it's always calculating what the radius is? Or do we do some, what is the other policy? Do we only allow them to draw the radius horizontally, for example? See, lots of things I've not worked out yet. So I think we'll just keep it fairly trivial for now and set that to just simply a radius. Right, of course we need these functions now because this is an abstract base class. And these are going to change pretty quickly because, like I say, I've got to get all of that scaling information into here somehow. I've not really thought that through. And we'll just indicate that we're overriding those functions, just so people don't write in and complain. Right, so if it's a line and you want to draw yourself, let's have a think about that first. So what are we doing for drawing a line? Well, we've assumed that all of our shapes are lines here. We want to calculate 4 coordinates. And we want to draw those to the screen. So it's getting the world to screen transformation into the struct here, which becomes the interesting thing to do. So basically we want that. But as you can see, we're missing quite a few things. Well, the drawing routines are easy enough. But these world-to-screen transforms. So let's see what's chat suggesting for this. All right, Ben. Take care, man. Have a good night. It's nice to see Sleeping Bear back. I'm glad you've come back. I presume you've been busy with your day job, I think. Like to see me tackle Ben's challenges in a live stream. Right, so how do we get the world to screen function into our class? One option is I could pass them into the base class, and so then all shapes are affected by some static method that's in here. It just seems a little bit untidy. I think instead what I want to pass through, I'm never going to need screen to world, so I could potentially just pass the function through, I guess. Would that work? I don't think I've ever tried anything like that before. So if I wanted to pass in that particular function, world to screen, that just sounds like it's messy already. I think what I'll do instead is pass in the only parameters that we actually care about, which are our offset and our scale. So they become part of the information that is passed into here, and we'll have a local copy of world to screen. So we've got our float, f scale, and OLC, BF2D, offset. So they're just going to get passed in as well. Copy you, stick you in there, and stick you in there. Well, rather than doing hacky things with function pointers and all that sort of stuff, we'll do it this way. So we need a local copy of world to screen somewhere in our hierarchy here, and we'll may as well stick it up there. Excuse me. Which will then also basically take in the whole transform. So we've got our vector coming in, our screen coordinates coming out, plus our scale and our offset. Offsets, that's all there, that gets passed back out. I'll just try and keep things a little bit consistent with the naming here, so offset and f scale, that's fine. Offset and f scale. Oh, Sleeping Bear. That's I'm sad to see. I hope your wife does get better. Is it just a cold? I hope so. Anyway. See, we're a nice, happy family here. We look out for each other. So what's going on here? Start and end. Why have we got too few functions in argument call? Well, of course that's true because I've just added some additional ones. So now we've got the ability to locally transform our parameters. Right, so now we've got a line, we've got a draw yourself function. Let's start putting this in correctly. I'm not using smart pointers. I'm just going to say that right now. So our basic shape is now temp shape. And because we're going to be using polymorphism, we're going to have to start working with pointers a bit. So we're now storing in our list shape star. Smart is dumb. Well, they have their place. So, now, what do I need to do? I'm creating my shapes. Where we're actually creating our shapes is here. So if the user pressed the L key, then we want to create a new shape and set one of its properties. So this is specifically for line. So if we're creating a new line, we want to do temp shape equals new. Yep, everybody's going to complain. New s line, and then temp shape dot start is equal temp shape 0. Where did that 0 come from? Come here, lost my cursor. There we go. So we've created a new shape. We've set its start coordinate. We've not set its start coordinate. Why have we not set its start coordinate? What did I call it? What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Let's try and make this a bit easier for myself. So s-line, so rather than putting in all sorts of horrible casts, temp shape.start equals v cursor. Yes, it needs to know that it's a line. We're currently drawing a line. So, what hack can we do to make this work? Well, we can probably assume that most of our primitives will consist of a start and an end point. So let's shove those into our base class, because the start and the end point could be used to define the radius for the circle. I think I was hinting at that before. So we'll stick those in there, which means they no longer do anything. That doesn't make any sense. And we'll come to circles in a minute. So start and end is what we're going to be using to define our shape. So that now means we can create a basic shape, temp shape, declare it as line, but we can access the start vector and temp shape. So basically it's not really start and end anymore, it's point 1 and point 2, but we can tidy that up later. Once the user has clicked, we push back into our list of shapes, temp shape. This assumes, of course, that the user doesn't cancel. We'll handle escape keys and things like that later on. So I've got my list of shapes. I now want to draw my list of shapes, which has become suddenly much simpler, because now it should just be shape, draw yourself. This to indicate the PGE, F scale, and V offset. Right, so we're now drawing shape. So we always want to draw our temporary shape. That's no different. That just becomes a very simple thing too. We don't need any of this anymore, but we did want to sort of specify that it's got a different colour. Now, that's probably something else that we need to store in our base class. So shape, temp shape at least. Temp shape, draw yourself. We'll just see without colours for now, just to see if we're starting to get these things to work. So this should, if it compiles, behave exactly the same way as it did before. He says optimistically. Let's have a look. So I want to start drawing a new shape. Yep, the temp shape is drawing itself, and I click and it's defined. So I'm drawing a new shape, I click and it's defined. Good, so that's working the same way that it did before, but now we're accumulating a list of shapes. So let's add in now circle, which is not altogether all that different really. So instead of defining a line, I'll use the C key for circle. It becomes a circle here, and nothing else really needs to change, because now polymorphism has took over. We don't care about drawing the shapes individually. The system's going to take care of that for us. We just need to fill in what happens when the circle is trying to draw itself. So I think it's important that we calculate our radius now, and yeah, we're kind of going to have to do this each time. I think maybe later I'll make this a bit smarter, but let's do it like this for now. So our radius is equal to our start minus end dot mag. Nice, huh? So we've got a radius, and we want to draw our circle now. So we need some parameters: world to screen, etc., etc., etc. So our midpoint for our circle is SX and SY. Start to SX and SY. Yeah, that's correct so far. Well, that should be V offset. And the end point for our circle, which doesn't make that much sense, I suppose, is actually going to be a circle of particular radius. Now, that radius needs to be scaled as well, but not offset. That's what we were learning before. So we want to draw PGE, draw circle. We'll probably get this the wrong way round to start with. SX, SY, F radius times F scale. It might be divide by F scale. I can't remember if F scale is increasing as I'm zooming in or decreasing. And I think that's it. OLC white. So we're going to draw the circle white. But then I also want to draw some interesting points that help me define what the circle is, some handles as it were. So I'm going to draw a small little red circle at its midpoint, and I think I'll draw something at its end point too. So I do actually need both of those, don't I? Right. So I'm pressing a circle, I press C to do that, it adds it in, let's have a look. Zoom in. Okay, so I select a point to start, C, and as I drag out, it's choosing a particular radius. Now it's clamping to the nearest point, which is the second thing that I wanted, and I click, and it's defined. So there we go, circle with a radius. So now if I press L, I can draw a nice smooth line from there to there. Let's say I want to put a particular bend radius in here and move it out a couple to there. So these are the things I'll still want to do. I want to be able to make it so I can move these points later on. So let's also stick in a bend radius there. Circle there. Line going up here. Let's try and get something that's a bit different, and so that's going to be circle, circle to there, and line from there to there. So I've started to create more interesting shapes. Now I'll have to add in the user editing features later so I can drag things around, but I've now got a basic set of primitives which is helping me define some vectors. Can you see them? All I can see is the mini chat window on Twitch. So basically what I've got on one of my screens is that. And the Twitch dashboard is awful. There's just too many things going on. Oh, hi Fisk, you appeared. A random Swede appeared, indeed. You've already looked like totally lost it. Well, it's first coding stream I've had for some time. Let's say I've not been very well. Right, so that's circles, that's lines, that's zooming, and that's panning. I think we've got a nice little vector editor, which is the very basics of something, which I think will grow. There's still a few little gremlins I want right now, so I'm going to use Sleeping Bear's GUI to add some additional functions such as checkboxes to disable different bits. I need to add user selection, and user selection in an intelligent way that allows me to actually select shapes that are on top of each other. Do I want to just always handle the nodes? It's probably the easiest way, but it would be nice to be able to select the lines too. And then of course I want to export them all to an interesting file. And then I might want to be able to customize them with additional functionality. Now, I'm, as you might be able to tell, I'm preparing to wrap up the stream because it's been an hour and 40 minutes for me and my voice is falling apart. So if anybody is streaming, please let me know, and we can do some sort of a handover, because I know there's 3 excellent streamers in this chat as it is. Very well worth watching. So give me a shout out if you're thinking of streaming in the next couple of minutes. What's the last few features that I can think of adding on to this right now? We wanted to add colour, didn't we? So we wanted it so we could see the shape that we're editing as distinct from the shape that's been solidified. So I think we probably want to add to this, our basic shape, a base colour. So we'll add pixel. Oh dear, why am I shouting again? What's going on? We'll see. Pixel and colour. So just simply col. And that's publicly available, that's fine. And we want to, when it's drawing itself, choose that colour instead. So we'll actually throw in a quick default value. So any new shape that's created, and this is where we make a little bit of a distinction. So any new shape that's created, that's where we're going to define it as being green, so we can see that it's being edited. We'll have to do the same down here. Col. And when we're cementing the shape in place with the mouse click, before we push it back into the list, we're just going to set that shape's colour to be white. So now, oh, hang on, error. Why error? Yes, because that's a stupid thing to do, isn't it? Doesn't make any sense. Temp shape colour equals white. There we are. That's better. Right. So now, when we're drawing the shapes, so we'll draw a circle. It's green until we cement it in place. Very nice. There we go. So within, the space of an hour, a little bit of fumbling about and some distractions, created a CAD package. Perfect. Right. Is anybody streaming? Let me know. Other than that, I would suggest certainly go and check Gareth Hubbell's Twitch channel. He's currently in the chat. It's a really good stream. He's a great guy. Go and check him out. Ugly Swedish Fisk, that's here as well, or Ugly Swedish Fish, another great streamer. Well worth checking out. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you for tonight. I know it's been a bit rushed. We've seen some mistakes, but this video will be up on YouTube anyway in a couple of days. So, I bid you all a very good night and a great weekend to you all as well. See you later, guys. Take care.